So first, Brenda, I guess, is tell us a little bit about how and why you got involved with CASA.
Okay. Well, I was a former elementary education teacher and I retired about 5 years ago. And I knew at that time that I wanted to keep doing something with kids or for kids. I had a friend who had done student teaching at our school, and she later became a CASA volunteer. So she got a hold of me and said, hey, you would be good at this. We need volunteers in Jefferson County. And I just didn't know if I was ready to get back in and do something like that. But I thought, no, this is something that I can do, and it's not going to take my whole entire retirement time, but I can do something, and I can do something for kids, because that was 40 years in education. I decided to do that. So I looked into it, talked to her a lot about it to see what all it involved, and then started the training program, and the rest is history. But I'm fairly new. I'm just going on just about 5 years as a CASA volunteer.
I've talked to some that have been in it. I think the longest has been like 15 years.
Right.
Some that have been in it for like 2 months in. So I'm
Right.
still learning how it goes. So tell me, can you kind of explain for someone who is maybe interested a little bit of what that training process kind of looked like?
Sure. It's online training, and I'm not sure if they still do online training now or not, but that's how I did it. I worked through a packet of material, and I think it was about 30 hours of training. And you go through, a session, a unit, whatever you want to call it, and then you take a little assessment on that. So you have to make sure it's not that if you're going to pass or fail, they help you along with it, but it's help you learn about the judicial system, about foster care system, all the rules and regs. And that's the part that's the hardest. And it's continuous learning. And we have to have continuous learning hours along the way as well. We have to have 12 hours of continuous education every year that we're a CASA volunteer. So it's always updating. We have a lot of training that's online. We have in-person training. And just to keep you abreast of what's going on in the system. And just a little backstory with me, I kind of had an involvement. We had some family members that were in the foster care system, so close family members. A child who went through addiction issues, and so we kind of knew what it was like. And I thought, okay, I know what the kids have gone through, so I think I can be a help to these kids. And sometimes that personal experience is a detriment, but sometimes it really helps you because you know what kids are going through. And like I said, in education, teaching for nearly 40 years, I would see kids come through into my classroom that were, in the system or, victims of abuse or, drug addiction families and stuff. So I really knew what was going on, and it kind of helped me. I think it helps me to be a better volunteer. I kind of veered off.
That's okay. That's perfect. As a volunteer, how is it being able to make like a one-on-one connection and see the impact? As an educator, you always kind of hope you have the impact,
Right.
but boy, with
Right.
CASA, I have a
Right.
feeling you
Yep.
see it front and
And
center.
I'll tell you about my very first case. I'm only on my third case. My first case took quite a long time, and it was a case with 4 children involved, 4 young children, 2 boys and 2 girls, the youngest being just 2 and 3 by the time I was finished with the case. But you get so close to those kids, and they're not really sure what's going on either. And no matter what, kids love their parents. No matter what their parents have done, no matter what their parents have gone through, and as it should be, kids love their parents. So when I came in, and they were in a family situation where the grandma was the foster parent also. So they were in a kinship home is what it's called. But when I came in, I had known the 2 older boys from being at school. They didn't know me real well. They weren't in my class or anything, but I had a little bit of idea about them. But just being somebody to be there, to play a game with them, to read a book with them, to give, the foster grandma a little break. She could go in the kitchen, have a cup of coffee or whatever, and just to have a little getaway. But I would go visit the kids at school. And so they really liked that. I would go to their ball games and things like that just to make a connection. They were little enough that when we'd go to court, they were never there, and they really didn't understand all that was going on. But we worked through a lot of things and worked through a lot of things with their parents. Their parents worked so hard because that was their goal, to be reunified with their kids. You know, they got themselves into some trouble and realized that. But they worked hard to get themselves back out so that they knew that they could bring their kids home again. So that had a really happy ending when we went to court for the final time. And it took almost 2 years of working with the families and getting them right on the right track. The mom and dad had both been in some issues with the law. So when that reunification day came at court, and the kids were there along with mom and dad and grandma, and I was there, of course, with the kids too. And so then we had a little celebration. The judge had cookies and, you know, little prizes and stuff for the kids. And then we were sitting back in the courtroom, and this is where I really knew that I did make a difference. You know, you never really know if you're making that difference or not. But the second to the youngest one, and she was 4 at the time, she hollered to the judge and she says, "Judge, come here. I want you to meet my best friend, Brenda." And that was the moment, I'll start crying. That was the moment that I knew I indeed had made a difference in those kids' life, and I'd helped them along. And I followed them along too after that. I kind of kept in touch with the grandma to see how they were doing. So that you know, I knew that then I had done something to help those kids along. So
That's what it's all about,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
With the radiothon, we're doing awareness and we're also raising funds.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the training. It's not just a kind of show up and
No.
here's kind of some things. You mentioned that there's ongoing training.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine a lot of the funds, which is kind of the nice thing about the radiothon, is we're getting direct funds directly
Right.
to the chapters. But that's where a lot of these funds are going to go.
Right, right. And, you know, CASA is, you know, we're not out there to make money. That's, you know, and the volunteers that we get do this strictly because they want to make a difference. So any funds that we can raise, you know, to help with that, to help bring trainings in for the CASA volunteers. You know, we do have some paid staff. And it's so very important, and we know with federal cuts and, you know, cuts everywhere, it's very important. So we appreciate this radiothon and trying to help raise the money to bring speakers in that can guide our volunteers and help us along the way. So,
If you were going to go on the campaign trail to get some more volunteers, which there are plenty of opportunities for that,
Right.
What would you say to someone who is maybe thought about CASA but isn't quite sure if it's the right thing for them?
Yeah, and I've done some different engagements with our church. Our church sponsors CASA now. Every year we donate a certain amount. So I have talked to church groups about doing that. I've talked to my friends about it and just trying to show them. And I give little stories about how much they can help. And I'm not going to say it's not time consuming, because it is. But anything worthwhile is time consuming. We have to fill out reports before we go to court. We have to do, you know, time sheets so that we keep track of our volunteer hours. We have to meet with our kids at least once a month. Most of us do more than once a month. Visiting the schools, you know, reaching out. So I always, you know, especially to retired teachers, because they've seen kids in the system. So I try to talk to teachers that, you know, I've known that are retired and might have some free time to do it. And it's something, you know, the training itself doesn't take that long. You can do it on your own. You know, there's no set hours where you have to go sit in a classroom and take the training, so you can work through it on your own. Our supervisors are such good support for us if we have questions about something, because there's a lot to learn and a lot about the court system. Sometimes you go into a court situation and I'm not sure what the jargon is and all that. So we have a lot of people that help us along. But it's so important that we keep those supervisors in those positions and we don't lose them to something else. So any kind of fundraising for that too, to keep our office going. We also, I think, use funds to help, you know, there were instances with my first case, especially, and my second case, where the families might have needed, you know, beds for their apartments they're starting or something. And CASA tries to come up with the funds to help parents, you know, with those kinds of things. So any amount of money that we can raise is really wonderful. But I mainly now I talk to my retired friends to see, because they have some extra time. Because it would be hard to do if you're working full time. I can see how that would be difficult. But just reaching out to people that I know that care about kids.
If you were going to summarize the impact that CASA could have on a kid, how would you do that?
Well, like I said, that little child that said, "Here's my best friend," that pretty much sums it up right there. The young lady that I'm working with now, she's a teenager, and just having somebody there to listen to troubles about, becoming a young woman, or trouble, here's something in school that I need help with. Lots of times, foster parents and their parents who are working hard to get the kids back, they are so stressed with everything else that's going on. And so just having an advocate, a friend, and somebody that's not going to, not going to have any opinions about what's going on, you're just there for that child to advocate for them. And to let them know that, hey, if you go to court, I'll be there with you. I'll hold your hand through the whole situation. If you need to cry about it, if you need to talk about it, we can do that. So just to be a friend and advocate for those kids. And also, if you see something that's going wrong, either with the biological parents or in foster care systems or, Health and Human Services, we can be an advocate there too, because a CASA volunteer has access to all that information, and we use it to advocate for that child and make sure things are going the way they're supposed to be going for the kids.
Is there anything else I should ask as we do
Gosh.
this? Knowing that, like I said, this is a radiothon.
Right.
We're trying to bring awareness,
Right.
trying to raise some funds. Is there anything else? I feel like you've said it really well.
Yeah,
But
and just reach out if people have some time to volunteer, or if you can donate financially, that's so important too. And one thing I'll say about CASA, I didn't know a lot about it until I started in on it. I'd heard about it a little bit, but so the more research I do and the more studying I do, I see how much of a difference CASA volunteers make. And I will say, and I've told people this before, it's not an easy job. My husband had asked me when I first decided I was going to do this, and then, you'd go visit the kids, or you'd come home, or you'd take a course, or, you'd do an online study, or you'd have a Zoom meeting about, there's lots of horrible things that are going on, lots of bad things are going on. And I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve, so I get emotionally involved, and sometimes that's hard too, because you do get really attached. So it's not an easy job. He said, "Why would you want to do this?" And I said, "Because I can, and because I need to." There are so many kids out there that just need somebody to be on their side, to be objective and just to help them when they need it. So I guess if I would say anything, it's not an easy job, but it's the best job. It's hard, but you can really see how you can make a difference in kids' lives.